we go. All right, I'd like to call to order the October 16th Lake Washington School Board meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve the October 16th agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Bernard, seconded by Director Bleasner. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, hearing none, motion carries. So normally our second meeting of the month, we wouldn't have public comment, but tonight, since we are doing it at 7 o'clock, we have got a public comment period. We do provide a time during our working meeting for the board to hear from the public. There are many avenues through which the public can communicate with us, including emails, calls, and letters. Please note that this isn't a question and answer session with the board. It is really more a matter of providing us with input. And we won't respond to you during the public comment or during the meeting. If you're willing to wait around until we're done with all of our business this evening, then you're welcome to hobnob with us, but that usually goes into the wee hours. Typically, we allow up to 30 minutes on the agenda for public comment, and if a number of people are signed up to speak on the same topic, we limit the time devoted to a single topic to 30 minutes. We don't have 30 minutes worth of comment, but we do have a number of people signed up to speak on the same topic, so I'm going to go into the details of that. When you are speaking on a topic that has already been discussed by previous speakers, we're likely to be more sympathetic if you get up and either very briefly say, "Me too," or you talk about some new dimensions of the problem. If you say the same thing to us 10 times in a row, that tends to make us a little grumpy because we have jobs to get to tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. So that said, when your name is called, actually, sorry, just so you are aware of it, this is broadcast. You'll approach the podium in the center. The narrowcast will be showing you. The microphone is already hot. Just grab it and adjust it to your height. It's a pretty sensitive microphone. You don't have to eat it. And each of you will have 3 minutes to speak. At the end of 2 minutes, the nice little stop sign over there will go yellow. At the end of 3 minutes, it'll go red. You'll hear a beep. At that point, we would very much appreciate that you wrap things up rapidly. That does not preclude you from making comment through all other avenues. And I will say, comment that is received orally is not nearly as useful to us as comment that's received in written form through email. We have heard from a number of individuals on this topic over the last couple of weeks. So when you do approach the podium, the only thing is, please just give us your full name and school attendance area for the record. And then you have 3 minutes, and we will roll through from one individual to the next. Finally, and I don't think this will come up for anybody, but it is important, there are some things that we do not take public comment on in our broadcast meeting. One of those is individually named staff, unless you're telling us they're absolutely wonderful. And we really do expect attendees to treat everyone with respect and civility. That's usually very rarely a problem. All right, so the first person signed up to address the board this evening, or persons, are Laura Stevenson and James Barber. Jamie, okay, sorry.
Good evening. Can you guys hear us okay? Not too loud? Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. My name is Laura Stevenson, and my son goes to Explorer Elementary School. And this is?
I'm Jamie Barber. My son goes to Dickinson.
Great. So we're here actually tonight on behalf of the Westchester community, which is right off of Novelty Hill Road, and again, feeds into Dickinson Elementary School. And we're here on behalf of 80 families in our neighborhood. This represents about 80%
of the families.
Of our families in Westchester. And as a community, we have been proud supporters of the bond effort. Many of us were out campaigning for the bond and making sure to help support our neighbors and saying yes to this important work. And tonight we're here to share a little bit of input on the latest reboundary proposals. And our community right now is standing wholeheartedly in support of scenario A. We feel that putting Westchester at Wilder really provides our kids with a lot of stability, and there's ample space in the school to accommodate the 41 children of Westchester. So we think that makes a lot of sense. In addition, for our families which are regularly going back and forth to the school, many of whom are volunteers and participate in the classrooms with their children and others. Going against the flow of traffic makes a lot of sense for us. It would be an easy process, and it keeps us, also the scenario keeps us aligned with Evergreen Middle School as well as Redmond High School, as we have been and are today. With regard, the second option that we wanted to put forward, and which our community has discussed extensively, is the notion that we might go to Rosa Parks Elementary School. And Rosa Parks is really, we consider it almost our neighborhood school. Right behind the neighborhood, there's a trail there. Many of our families over the weekends will take walks, bicycle rides right over to the school. It's the place you go when you wanna play. And so for us, it makes natural sense that might be something that we would consider for the Westchester community and our families. Lastly, I want to say with regard to scenarios B, C, and D, and we have a letter with us this evening that goes through this. One of the largest questions and concerns within the community has been around the district's allocation of students to Redmond Ridge East. And in scenarios B, C, and D, Westchester is slated to go to Redmond Ridge East. The question, I'm so sorry, I will wrap it up. The question that we have is really, at this time, there are 49 children slated to go. There's a housing development that's underway. It will open in June of 2018. There are 481 bedrooms coming out of that development, 109 units, 60 plus of which are 5-bedroom homes. And the district has allotted 49 children to come from that development. The question from our community and concern from our community is how we came to that number of 49 kids. It seems, in our view, to be a bit of an underestimation, and I'm being generous when I say a bit of an underestimation. And we want to understand that, because ultimately, if we find ourselves in a scenario a year or so down the line where it's much greater than that 49, then we're in a position where we could see our kids potentially having yet another transition. We don't want to do that. I'm sure you don't either. So anyway, we appreciate your time tonight. We have a letter. I know I'm over my 3 minutes. Thank you so much.
That's all right. Please hand the letter off to Diane.
Okay, great.
She'll make sure we get copies of it.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
We appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you. Our next person signed up is Martha Diamicis. And I apologize in advance to anybody who I've mangled your last name.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. My name is Martha Diamicis. I'm the Vice President of Communications for the Dickinson Elementary PTSA, and it's nice to see all of you up there. I'm very pleased, obviously, that we were able to pass the April 2016 bond and build space for our children. But I'd like to spend 2 minutes talking about the reboundary topic as it relates to my school community, which is Dickinson. I appreciate all the effort that's been put into the reboundary process, and specifically, so you know, I live in the area which is called the 220th corridor. The specific neighborhood is Hunters Wood or Hunters Wood Knoll. But there's several people actually here with me tonight as well that come from that corridor. In the most recent round of proposals, there's one scenario that we find unacceptable to our neighborhood, and that is scenario B. Scenario B takes us from our closest elementary, which is Dickinson, past the next closest elementary, which is Rosa Parks, to the third closest elementary, which is Redmond Ridge East. It is a 12-minute car ride for us to drive straight with no traffic, with no stops, from our home to Redmond Ridge East. And I also drove the supposed bus route without stopping, so obviously you have to make bus stops, and without traffic, and it took me 30 minutes. So I think it's an important thing to be aware of, and that's unacceptable for our families. Second, we believe that the enrollment projections at Redmond Ridge East are potentially not accurate, given that 481 bedroom complex that was just discussed by my colleagues. And if our concerns about overcrowding are true, similar to Jamie and Laura, is who would be the first children to be rezoned back out of an overcrowded Redmond Ridge East Elementary School, but those who live nowhere close to the Redmond Ridge East Elementary School, which is us. And this is not a chance that we are willing to take. And should scenario B become a reality, we will be challenged to remain advocates given management of our student population. The scenario we are most pleased with and ask you to please investigate further is scenario A, with some modifications to keep our local families at their neighborhood school. These modifications are to zone kids who live in the 232nd corridor back to Dickinson, to zone kids along Union Hill Road between 220th and 232nd back to Dickinson, and to zone all of the Hunters Glen neighborhood back to Dickinson. While scenario B is completely unacceptable, we are very open to discuss alternatives like scenario A with those modifications and mutually beneficial solutions that will allow you to accomplish your goals and to balance the student enrollment at all levels, at the high school, middle school, and elementary school level. Thank you.
Again, if you have a written version, please do drop it off with Diane. Our next speaker is Erin Snodgrass.
Hi, my name is Erin Snodgrass, and I too am part of the Dickinson neighborhood family. I'm gonna say me too to most all of Martha's comment. We sit out of the 232nd neighborhood, and I actually am in a smaller neighborhood of Meadowbrook, which only sends 3 kids to Dickinson right now. We're a smaller piece. And actually in B, C, and D, we stay at Dickinson, but we actually too would prefer A with the amendment that Martha talked about in fear of the rezoning. If it were to happen, we feel the kids with the smallest neighborhood and closest to Dickinson would kind of get shifted around. So please revisit the amendment to A as Martha had mentioned. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Our next speaker, Tanya Lyle-Glaister.
Hi, my name is Tanya Lyle-Glaister. I'm at Emily Dickinson. I'm Martha's neighbor, so I'm in the 220th corridor. And I'm really here to support our neighborhood and kind of just say, me too.
I hear ya. All right, Nicole Schock.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Schock, and I'm here also with Emily Dickinson Elementary, and I live on 220th. And I'm here to say me too to everything that they've already said. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And finally, Lisa Olson. We've got a Lisa Olson.
Hi, I'm Lisa Olson. I'm a parent at Emily Dickinson Elementary. I'm also off of 220th Corridor, and I would say me too as well. The one caveat I will say that I will go against a little everyone else is for scenarios B through D. In that scenario, we are not going to Dickinson, which is the closest elementary, and there is the 232nd Street, which is going to Dickinson. They are actually further away. So if for some reason B through D need to be considered, I would say go ahead and swap those. Otherwise, we're just passing each other as we're going to schools that are closer to the other person. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anybody who didn't sign up? Because that's all I've got in the way of signups. Come on up and just tell us who you are and what you want to talk about, and then you get your allotted 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Molly Hepkin, and I have 3 kids. 2 are at Explore. Sorry, it feels loud. And 1's at Evergreen. And I want to say me too to everything that everyone else said. And I also just want to add, I have like a strange sense of deja vu because I was here, I guess 3 years ago when you guys did the last reboundary. And at the time you all said, that you had heard from the community, and this was the solutions that you came up with. So I really hope that you listen to us now and work with us to come up with a solution that works well for everyone.
Well, thank you.
And we're willing to help.
Well, I can say quite confidently that this is not a done deal in any sense, and that we are still working with it quite actively in the study session and as a group. Don't disengage from the process. There is an open house scheduled online from the 25th to the 30th.
Okay, I did all those last time too.
Yeah, but anyway, remarkably, we've had a number of parents who have come up with awfully reasonable suggestions, and we've managed to work them through. So even the scenario A and B that you may have seen recently may not be the revised A and B that we saw this evening in our work session. So it is still something where it's being optimized, and all of the conditions or the concerns you're talking about are valid, real concerns that the committee is grappling with. I can't promise that we will make everybody happy. At the end of the day, we've got a big district. We've got to move kids around to fit the buildings we've got. But we're doing our darndest. So please stay engaged, stay tuned. It's not over yet. And your amendments, get as detailed of a version of those as you can to Diane, and she'll pass them along to the appropriate authorities so that they're at least in the mix.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
That is not my, sorry, I violated myself, but got enough of an audience that I thought I'd let you know. Anyone else? All right, so with that, we'll close the public comment portion of the meeting and move on to the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Bernard, seconded by Director Leisner. Dr. Pierce, would you please poll the board?
Nancy?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Siri?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, I forgot to mention this at the top of the meeting. Eric is absent and excused. He has good reason to not be here tonight. With that, per our usual custom, Dr. Pierce, will you please review the donations?
I am happy to review the donations. If you turn to tab 5, this evening we have $35,576 in donations, $29,160 from Peter Kirk Elementary, PTSA to Kirk Elementary, for stipends for intramural sports, Xeno Math, chorus, recycling, reading program, student council yearbook, and outdoor ed. Also to support classroom enrichment and to purchase IXL site licenses. $1,116 from Thoreau Elementary PTA to Thoreau Elementary to provide stipends for their running club. $1,500 from Finhill Middle School PTSA to Finhill Middle to purchase student planners. And finally, $3,800 from Eastlake High School PTSA to Eastlake High School to support math lab. So all total, $35,576 in very generous donations.
Well, as usual, the board would like to personally thank everyone who's chosen to support our schools and our students. We always appreciate the generosity of our population, of our constituents. On to the non-consent agenda. Our first item on the non-consent agenda is authorization to sell bonds. Dr. Pierce.
Great, thank you. I want to recognize that Cynthia Weed, who is our bond counsel, and Dave Trageser, who's our bond underwriter, are here sitting right next to Barbara Posthumus, so they are both here should the board have any specific questions. If you turn to tab 6, we have the situation recommendation, and I will read that to you and read the recommendation, and again, Cynthia and Dave are here should the board have any questions. So resolution number 2243 authorizes the sale of up to $165 million of the bonds to reduce overcrowding and enhance student learning environments approved by the voters in April 2016. The resolution delegates to the superintendent or associate superintendent, business and support services the authority to direct the bond underwriter to market the bonds within certain parameters set forth in the resolution. This method allows the timing of the bond sale to be best aligned with favorable market conditions. This advance authorization also provides flexibility in timing the sale, as the sale can be scheduled based on market conditions within a year of the resolution, as long as the interest rate parameters in the resolution are met. The district's bond counsel has reviewed this action in the resolution and finds them to be in legal compliance. The terms of this transaction will be reviewed by the district's independent financial advisor, Northwest Municipal Advisors, prior to the sale being commenced to ensure the best interests of the district are represented. That's the situation. The recommendation is that the Board of Directors adopts resolution number 2243, authorizing the issuance and sale of unlimited tax general obligation bonds of the district in the aggregate principal amount of up to $165 million as presented.
I'll move approval.
Second.
So, can you remind me what the bond, which new schools are in this construction?
I'll let Barbara, just because she can speak to
Yeah.
the
Thank you.
specifics here.
So what this relates to is the voters in April of 2016 approved the $398 million of bonds that are building our 8 projects. And we are selling those bonds over a period of 3 cycles. So we sold the first set of bonds in August of 2016, and we're selling the next set in this fall, and the goal is around December. And then the last set of bonds to total the 398 will be sold next fall. So it's based, you sell the bonds based on when we need,
Right.
For all
the
the
cash to build
sorry,
all
for
the
all the
projects.
yeah.
It's been a
So,
long week, so I forgot that
That's-
this is the current bonds that are already approved going forward. And
correct.
Yes, this evening's interesting because there's
Yes.
two
We have a bond
bond-related
There's another piece coming, so
resolutions.
we'll just hold that
Yes.
question
So-
until later.
So we have dual,
Yes.
it's efficient because we have our advisors here to deal with both issues.
That
So
is
it's very
appreciated.
efficient.
All right, so anybody have any questions on the current topic? That said, I misplaced my script here. That said, do we take a vote at this point? We do.
Yes.
Yes, okay. And do you pull the board, or is this?
Well, Nancy made a motion.
Yeah, exactly. Moved by Director
Mark
Bernard, seconded by
it,
Director
and then there's
Leisner.
some discussion.
We've had as much discussion, I think I already did ask for discussion. Thank you. All right. Hearing none, having screwed it up myself and tried to discuss the wrong topic, there's none on this topic, pretty cut and dried. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, hearing none, motion carries. Okay, on to the more
Okay.
fun piece.
Yeah, on to the next item on non-consent. So if you turn to tab 7, as the board will remember, at the last board meeting, we did a formal presentation on the 2018 bond and 2 levies for the board's consideration and action this evening. So we won't be doing the presentation again since we did the presentation at the last meeting, but I will just briefly recap the situation. And all of the resolutions are included under tab 7, including, Chris, I think your question that you raised previously in terms of bond projects. So the projects that will be, yes, on the proposed 2018 bond are here on page 14. So just to remind everyone, the Bond and Levy Advisory Committee was assembled with community and staff representation to advise me as superintendent in making a bond and levy recommendation to the board. The advisory committee reviewed plans for the bond measure based on recommendations for projects developed by the Long-Term Facility Planning Task Force, and those recommendations originally were presented to the board from the task force in November of 2014. Those recommendations informed the 2016 bond that passed, and we have many construction projects currently underway, and also informed the plan for projects moving forward, including the projects that would be funded as part of the 2018 bond measure. So in addition, the committee reviewed plans for the Educational Programs and Operations Levy, informed by legislative changes and the state-approved categories. They also provided helped us review parent input and input on the capital projects levy. So 3 ballot measures are being recommended for the February 13th, 2018 election, which is the first available election date for 2018. It's anticipated that most King County school districts proposing levies during 2018 will do so on February 13th. The 3 ballot propositions being recommended include a 4-year educational programs and operations levy to replace the levy passed in 2014, a 4-year capital projects levy to replace the 4-year levy passed in 2014, and a bond measure, which is the second of 4 planned measures as part of our long-term facility plan to build new schools to accommodate the district's growing enrollment. The resolutions are included as part of your materials, and the board saw the formal presentation at the last board meeting. So the recommendation is for the board to adopt Resolution 2244, the replacement of existing educational programs and operations levy, Resolution number 2245, replacement of existing capital projects levy, and Resolution number 2246, bonds to reduce overcrowding and enhance student learning.
I'll move approval.
Second.
All right. Exactly. Now discussion. Nancy's really looking forward to this. What was this, your second to last or third to last?
Third to last.
Okay. Yes. So she's really enjoying herself. Any discussion of these proposals?
We had such a thorough discussion last week, or 2 weeks ago, that I have no further questions or comments. I think it might be nice just to summarize. These are, the levies are replacement levies.
Yes, so Nancy's...
bond is in a continuation of our long-term plan from our 60-member community task force recommendations. So this has all been well thought out.
Yes, so to pile on to what Nancy just said, if you want the long and drawn out, very detailed version, please watch our last meeting. In a nutshell, we have two levies that are almost entirely about maintaining our standards of service in the district, with the exception of adding a 7th period to the high school, which is one of the things that I've been dying to do since I first got onto the board. Very excited about that, and it's going to be very good for our kids when we've only got 24 classes and you can't fail one anymore. So going to a 7-period day actually lets kids be kids. Finally, the bond as proposed, as was mentioned, is, again, we are still in catch-up, dealing with the growth bulge that has come through our district. This round and the next round we're still in catch-up. We're not remodeling, we're building new facilities to accommodate the kids who are already here. Mark, Siri?
Sure. Now, this might be the appropriate place for the question as to which projects will come under this bond. Would you like to ask that question at this point, or shall I?
You're welcome to ask it. My only problem is I can't find the actual project, so I can't answer it. Tracy, are you? Great, fantastic.
I can certainly answer that. And
Okay.
if you turn to page 14 in your packet, so resolution number 2246, funds would be used to construct and equip one new elementary school, construct and equip one new choice high school, construct and equip an addition at Lake Washington High School, remodel or rebuild and enlarge and equip Kamiakin Middle School and Alcott Elementary Schools, acquire land for new buildings, and make other capital improvements.
Thank you very much.
I have to say, I'm very excited to see Kamiakin out there. I do have to remind people that for 20 years, I have been part of this modernization program in this district, and my children never once got to go to one of the new schools.
Maybe your
And
grandchildren,
I do school
Nancy.
facilities for a living.
Okay.
Just need to have some grandchildren, Nancy, and then they can
Thank
come.
you, Tracy.
All right. So Siri?
Yeah, just lastly, to say thank you to our community to being involved in getting this going forward. The bond rate will continue to maintain our promise of maintaining the tax rate in a fiscally responsible approach in dealing with our facilities challenges and really phasing that in and trying to be stable in dealing with taxation. With the shifts that have occurred at the legislature with McCleary funding and that shift, those have created different impacts as to how we have to address those. So our local levy on the EP&O, actually we have a slight decrease in that tax rate going forward. And then our capital levy is a replacement levy, staying at the same. So there's been a lot of work to really think about being fiscal responsible of how we ask to our community, and I appreciate the work that went into that, to really think about that going forward. And it's good to keep working at our aging buildings and growing population as we continue that. And the addition of the 7th day is a very exciting component, and that's what our levy will give a capacity for us to be able to do at our high schools, with Core 24 being one of those components. This gives that freedom for our high schoolers to have opportunity to do more. So that's an exciting piece that we get to add.
Thank you. Any more discussion? Oh, Mark.
I'd like to add that while the 7-hour day, not 7-day, whatever, the 7th hour added not only allows for extra electives, which is great for those who wish to achieve them, I think it takes a tremendous pressure off of high school kids today, and we've all seen in the last several years the intensity of pressure put on kids and the results of it. And we don't need any more tragedies in any school district, and we certainly don't want them in ours. And I think this is going to be a help of a relief valve, almost a release valve, if you will, for those kids who all of a sudden get jammed up one semester and they start freaking because they think 3 years down the road, I'm just out of luck. And this provides that release valve. And I think it's fantastic that we're going to have it.
For those who don't know, because their kids are too young, that's because we now require things, it's a state requirement, 24 credits for graduation. And if you only have a 6-period day, which is all the state has funded, although we've had, alternatives, my daughter definitely had 7-period days, 0 after school, whatever, but they weren't part of the state funding. They've always been district supported and not really available for all students. And there's no flexibility. So our children need more options, and they also need that flexibility, as Mark said, that hasn't been there.
Yes. So with that, any further discussion of measures? Okay, now Diane, can we take one vote, or do we have to take 3 separate votes? One vote, yay, okay. Moved by Director Bernard, seconded by Director Bleasner. All those in favor of the, did Mark? Oh. Whatever. I'll let Stuart have it once. Director Stewart seconded it. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Yay. All right. Now the hard part. Okay, now we're on to our last item, which is the approval of the literacy monitoring report. Dr. Pierce?
Great. So this is in conjunction with our new ER monitoring process. If you turn to tab 8, there's a recommendation to approve the report that was presented at the October 2nd meeting. So the board will recall at the October 2nd, 2017 meeting, we formally presented end result 2, literacy and language. Following the presentation of the report, board member comments were collected and provided back to board members. The board has identified and documented consensus comments with respect to assertions of progress and exceptions, and the board has identified focus or priority areas and presentation comments to provide direction to me as superintendent as specified in board policy BCR 5, monitoring CEO performance. So the recommendation this evening is for the board to approve the monitoring report for ER2 literacy and language as presented.
I have a question. We're going to vote on these? I had not actually realized that before. Are we going to vote or just discuss?
What's your take, Siri?
I mean, the thought was that if there was agreement, it would be voted on this evening. If there was needed for additional amendments or changes, then yeah, that might have to be a possibility. But the idea was.
It's just odd because we don't usually vote on things like this.
Well, so it's with, I think that the conversation, as I recall from the extended study session, is that the board has a process for approving ELs.
That's true.
Or executive limitations, and they tend, the process is they go on consent agenda unless there's items to talk about. And the board hasn't really done a formal approval process historically for ends results. We've presented the ends results. The board has given individual comments, but there hasn't been a kind of a consensus summary back and then a formal approval of the report. So that's what tonight would be essentially.
And this is something where we could put it into consent.
Well,
It's really-
I
it's up-
don't
that part's up
know.
to
I
the
think
board.
it's always something for discussion. That decision will be made when I'm gone. But, no, I just hadn't thought about voting
Yeah.
on it because it's not, But
Well, and this is something where we're still
I am
working our way
open.
through it. We, figuring out how this works for all of us, and
And so
far,
the whole concept, so basically, I took the feedback from that board meeting and put it together under what were assertions of progress of evidence, exceptions of that evidence, what strengths, what challenges, and therefore looking on focus areas and priorities, what feedback came through about the presentation, and any components there. So the idea is to have one summary document that just sort of puts it in one place as to what was that discussion, and have that agreed that the board says, yes, we are all in agreement that this is what we agree to. And then that can provide direction to Dr. Pierce. And also then we have reference to be able to go back and utilize going forward.
and all of which I'm comfortable with. The only thing, it's going to be unusual that we'll need to revisit this. So my preference is when a vote is going to be a formality, to put it into consent, and then pull it out if there needs to be further discussion.
Sure. The challenge that I will say, since I was the first one to put this together and go through the process,
Yeah.
I will say it's not exactly the easiest thing in the world to do.
And we appreciate your efforts.
And so working through those components, I think the discussion value is actually in place right now, that is going to be a value for the board to go through and make sure, did we miss anything? Is this aligned to what people are saying? Is it not aligned? Because each one of us will be doing it at a different time. So I think it's a value to come back to the board.
I would agree with that, particularly if it's going to rise to the level of actually taking a vote. My concern is people are not going to always see eye to eye on how to do this. So this is a lot of work. This is much more than I was envisioning when you first talked about it. So it's, but I can also see it becoming a very valuable tool. And it will take care of that problem in March when we try and remember what we said about the ER reports.
Well, that's a major value to all of us. So this is something where I'm not saying that we need to move it into consent immediately. We probably should have discussions, but frankly, because the structure of what we were going at, it worked for me this time. I mean, I'm going to see how well it works for me when I'm in charge of writing it.
Yeah, you got
We'll see how much
challenged
I
now.
whine later. But Siri, I mean, for you, you're always the overachiever. How much burden was this on you?
Actually, I mean, in some regards, there's not a burden, because really it's just looking at the analysis, and this is sort of the work. This is really the crux of what we should be doing. So I guess I don't view it as a burden. I viewed it as a way of really trying to make sure it was speaking for the board and not one individual person, and that we were focusing on not the actions that needed to be taken. So our goal isn't to say, go do this program, but really, here's an area that we're concerned about, take that on and figure out where we need to go. And so the idea, that's really that focus with priorities, and that would be the area to me where there'd be the most discussion, honestly, if there was concerns or things that were missed. Let me know. I have 5 listed there. That's probably more than we need, honestly. But I couldn't settle those down to one myself in going through this because of the way it went through. So
I wasn't hoping for that level of, I mean, I do love getting things down to what you're actually going to focus on, but, 5, no more than 5, but 5 I'm good with in one of the EL, or one of the ER spaces.
And I'm assuming over time, the presentation piece would decrease, because ideally, those are incorporated across the board, so each time we would see, you know what I mean? That if there were concerns of, you know what, can we look at this breakout?
Right.
I would assume that will decrease over time as we learn to do this a little better and more efficiently. So that piece I see is much bigger than what it would be.
Anyway, Mark?
Yeah. A few days ago, I sent some comments, and Sherry wasn't sure exactly where they fit into the report. So I'd like to make sure that the comments that I sent out and that we can be incorporated in some manner, because it addressed a couple of things. One, it showed, I've shared some information regarding a school district in Pennsylvania that had adopted the Orton-Gillingham method of teaching reading, basically, which is very helpful to the dyslexic students with dyslexia. And it's been around for 50 years. But this district has found that it made much sense for the students without dyslexia as it did for the ones with dyslexia. And in fact, it enhanced their reading as well. And so as we look at literacy programs, I'd like for us to think about incorporating the Orton-Gillingham just for the idea of not only does it work for the regular students, it works for all students. And if it enhances it, and it enables the students with dyslexia to even be better prepared for school, let's move to it. And also, we had the program that Paul Vine put into effort on preschool program. I'd like for us to be able to break out the SPED program and look at that to see how it's progressed. If just from my reading of this, that the achievement numbers seem to be going down. Maybe I'm wrong, and please, if I am, show me how I am. If I'm not wrong, then what didn't quite work, and how can we improve it?
So I think the question comes down, when I was reading your email, you're making recommendations of programs to look at, which I think is fine, but I think that is separate from evaluating the ends report. So I'm not sure how you would incorporate those types of recommendations into an evaluation of the past years.
Well, I'd like to
reporting
look back
that
at the
is
past
the
year to
ER
see what went
report.
wrong with the first program.
What?
Looking back, if we're looking back at the previous program, what went wrong with the program that we were
Well,
initiating
that's the
for SPED?
questions we're asking for them to address in the next year.
Yeah, I'd like to have it specific, though.
And that would be, if I remember correctly, it was around preschool, correct?
Yeah,
That you were
preschool,
speaking
primarily the
to?
SPED program. preschool.
And so currently, the way it's reported in our ends results is these are our incoming kindergartners who are being reported on there. Some of them go to our preschool. Some of them, actually, the majority most likely do not in our kindergarten, have not had exposure. So it would seem that your question lies down to how is our preschool program in preparing kids for kindergarten readiness is sort of what that piece is. One of the focus areas mentioned was to see improvement at the early levels, pre-K and K, to be able to impact the upper grades most effectively, and to determine LWSD's programs at getting students ready for kindergarten. And that's sort of a area for them to figure out what's going on and how then what is LWSD's role in being able to work with pre-K.
So what if there was, I'm trying to get to
So
the end.
I think that's covered under focus and priority area, that concern.
Wait, what did you just say?
Under the focus and priority area, number 2 on the report,
Give me a page, please.
page 2.
Okay. Yeah, there's drawbacks to not having paper copies.
Paper copy.
I was thinking there could be just another section with, that involved suggestions possibly, or things, I'm trying to find it, because we did have some ideas of things we were hoping the district would be looking at.
Well, Section 2 leaves out the SPED program, to be quite frank. I don't see it in there. Maybe I'm just not seeing it correctly, but you bring out the low income, the Latino, and the ELL populations. It would appear from the numbers that the SPED population, there needs to be a reevaluation there too.
That is why reviewing it and having different eyes in the feedback is the key, so we can add SPED to that.
That's what I was proposing in my email.
We're still learning our way through this, but Mark, you have a good point. And yes, Siri, you're right. This is why we're trying to discuss these.
Where would you put it? I mean, there's my question for you. Is it just adding that group? Is it?
Well, it doesn't, to me, exactly fit under strengths or challenges. It more fits under the idea of recommendations.
Under the focus priority?
looks like it belongs in section 2. I mean, if you're talking about determining the possibilities of it looks to me like it belongs in section 2, when you're determining the possibilities for the role. Because we had a program, we had a considerable effort put into it, and our numbers aren't reflecting any movement. And if it's the idea that it's because we have private preschool mixed in with our own preschool, then we need to look at the numbers in our own preschool to be able to really to judge it better. Then, because that means that the numbers really weren't fitting being able to tell us what we needed to know.
So I see in addition, based on what you're saying, there's a combination. I think determine if LWSD programs are effective at getting students to kindergarten readiness is what you're speaking to in looking at that. And then if we add special education as another component of our special needs students is probably a better way to put it, at the end and adding that would hit those components. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So the other,
Sorry, as far as something like Orton Gillingham, that's not just elementary, that's just not just pre-K.
No,
right?
no. The
So-
Orton Gillingham goes to the whole picture.
Yeah.
and I believe that falls under reading at standard by third grade as a key indicator that determines overall
That's what I was going to
success
say
in
is
school.
calling it out there.
So that
is-
component falls in there.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that's the focus priority area.
Yep.
And then the idea is then for them to go back, staff to go back and figure out what would that mean, how would it do it?
Yep.
What are we current, and that's that analysis component that then would
And that's
come
why I
from.
also provided that news story to show you what had been done elsewhere. So what we can do is, I wouldn't depend on the news story, to be quite frank. I would want to go back and talk to that school district. What did they do? How did they do it? And what were their, results? Because to be quite frank, if it's working that well for them, I'd love to see it work well for our kids, especially the students with dyslexia that we really haven't addressed.
And I hear you on that, but from a board perspective, I'm not interested in prescribing how to get there. I am interested in prescribing, let's take this gap, measure it, and close it. And so I do want to see the gaps for SPED, and I think you had it in the presentation around SPED callouts. That those are that breakdown. We're still trying to find the right way to get SPED broken out such that we can see what's the performance of children. Trying to find a way for kids who are using alternative tests as opposed to kids who are on SLD, specific learning disabilities. So anyway, but I think that was in there. But I do hear you in terms of the focus priority moving forward, that this is something for literacy, it's not about just pre-K, it's about throughout, so.
So it is broken out. That's
Yeah.
the number 3. That's why those are separated. And actually, if you look at number 4, that's actually a middle school
Yeah.
concept. And around that ideas of trying to look at what that growth is
Yeah.
in that time frame.
And I agree with you, that the third and then the 5th and 8th, but neither of these were explicitly calling out the SPED component of it.
Absolutely,
So,
they weren't.
Yeah. Anyway, cool. I'm embarrassed that I missed it. Further comments?
No, I think those are good ideas. Now, if we're going to rewrite this, to add these ideas, then it could be in the consent agenda at the next
round.
meeting.
Yeah.
Especially since they're fairly minor going forward of what those changes need to be.
Okay. I like that.
Thank you, this was a lot of work.
Yes.
Yes, so I do have suggestions on how to do it differently next time. And
I'm
what I would
listening.
highly recommend that we do is each board member actually, when we get because we get it a week prior, the ends results and then the presentation, at least by that Thursday prior, Friday prior, sorry, I went one day ahead, is to actually look at what these categories are and really think about what you would put in those based on what you're seeing there. And do that homework first before coming to the table, and then that can actually be given to the person, along with the additional discussion and those pieces to start trying. You can take notes there too. And then that can help to sort of build that piece together to make sure that we get to
I
a
think-
solid piece here.
People need a blank appropriate to the ER report. So,
Absolutely.
That's
They're
something
the
to
same
fill
each
in.
time, so we can send that out with it. But that would be very beneficial, I think, for the person who's trying to summarize through, to just sort of have that and then be able to play off of that.
Okay. So we'll push the vote into consent next time. Any last comments? Thank you again, Siri.
Yeah, I'll say I appreciated this. I think this was beneficial in really being able to look through the data and sort of focus where, and now I do see that in a year, when we come back and look at this again, this is something we can pull out and look at and say, where are we going, where do we do? It also provides for strategic planning processes and budgeting, so it helps to align all those components. So I do think this is a key component of what we do.
Great. Okay, so the next agenda item is program reports, and I believe we have Dr. Pierce?
Oh, yeah, so Mike's on his way up here. We had moved, if you recall, a couple of reports from our last board meeting to this evening. So our program reports give us an opportunity to talk about some of the means that we are working on, so the programs and strategies and so forth, that then lend themselves to us achieving our ends. So tonight's program report is focused on intervention services, and Mike's bringing up the presentation as we speak. Okay, so I'll talk real briefly through the first couple of slides. You've seen these many times, but it's nice to actually be doing this one tonight, coming off of the heels of the end result conversation, because as you know, we have ends, which are ERs, and we have means, which are our executive limitations, and until this past year, we have done most of our executive limitations by consent agenda, so we don't really have an opportunity to speak about aspects of our academic program that we're working on, improvements that we're making as a result of our results. So that's why we started doing these program reports, and they're just 10-minute presentations, but it's designed to bring some life to the EL side of things, which previously had just been consent agenda, and so not really an opportunity to talk about these things. So the connection to ELs tonight is academic program, and you can go ahead, Mike. And so Mike's going to talk about our intervention programs and services. So these are the services and programs that we have in place to help our students who aren't meeting standard. Not special education tonight. We've got a separate program report that we have done previously on special education. So these are non-special education students who are not meeting standard or who need additional support for a variety of reasons. So Mike's going to take us through and give you a little update on where we are with intervention programs and services.
My monitor's not on.
Not working?
I can look over there, but
Want us
maybe
to
somebody
turn-
can turn on my monitor.
Is it just the button that needs?
I don't know, we never have to turn them on.
Thank you, Chris. Did you get it? All right. Okay.
All right, thank
Okay,
you.
yes, go ahead, Mike, thanks.
So just to add to what Tracy was saying, our intervention programs and services really are the foundation of our approach to addressing all of the discussion you were just having. How do we meet the needs of kids, particularly kids who are not at standard at grade level, or groups of students who are at greater risk for not being at standard? And with any foundation, we can always build on it, and I think part of the discussion that we're having is how do we build on it? In some cases, that's looking at different ways of approaching the problem, but in some cases, it's also looking at how, to what degree are we actually doing what we're saying we're doing? So if we have good interventions in place, are they happening for all kids? And to look at the intensity of those interventions. Do kids get enough of them? Do they have enough time with them? So I want to be clear that without these programs in place, we probably wouldn't be seeing the results we're seeing. And at the same time, we want to build on them, both by looking at how do we improve what's in place, and then also be thinking about what else might we need to bring in. So our intervention programs consists of a number of different services that we provide. These are all overseen by Kelly Pease, our Director of Intervention Support, and then supported by just an amazing group of people, specialists, teachers in our buildings, instructional assistants, principals, as well as parents and community members, all working together to ensure the success of our students in these 5 areas. So I'll give you a brief overview of each. Our safety net services is really our broadest support system. It's designed to look at kids who are not at standard at grade level. We use, in the early grades, DIBELS assessments and curriculum-based measures, and then as students get older, we also look at our Smarter Balanced assessment, and then we target very specific interventions with people who are well-trained to deliver those interventions, both in the classroom and in some cases as kids get older, or even in the summer for elementary students, programs that extend beyond the school day or school year. We have in our elementary schools safety net teachers that provide push-in services as well as pull-out. In some of our schools, we'll talk about a little bit later, we also have school-wide efforts. And then in secondary, we really do focus on very specifically providing support for kids in math and ELA through programs during the day, but also through credit recovery as kids get older and our summer school programs. And we provide support for all of those with curriculum as well as professional development for the people who deliver those services. Our safety net participation, just kind of interestingly enough, matches our enrollment growth and the number of kids that enter the system. So when you see an increase in safety net participation, I was just pulling up the numbers for enrollment, and they do roughly match the percentage of kids that have come into our students and the percentage you would expect to be below standard given our trends. So we do have slightly more students in elementary who are being served by safety net this year. It's about 1,758 to be exact, and it's up about 100 from last year. High school, our enrollment's down a little bit, and so again, the difference there is more a function of enrollment as opposed to a big concern, like why is our elementary safety net numbers going up so much, or are they going up so much? English language learners, we also provide support for. So these are students who are identified with a screening tool called the ELPA 21, a little different than we've used in the past. It's a new online screening measure that measures proficiency in English. And then based on the results of that, students are provided with services. And so we have, again here, people who are specifically trained to provide services in each of our schools, as well as people who provide services for students who exit the EL program. Those are teachers that provide not only training in language acquisition, but very specific literacy instruction, and in some cases, some help with math too, and helping teachers learn how to deliver content. So in addition to direct services for kids, there's also support for classroom teachers as they work with students in their classes who are English learners. That includes not only direct support, but professional learning. And then, as I mentioned, we have pretty robust system for students, not only who are in the system, but who exit the system, and continuing to provide support for them throughout the year. And I'll have some data I'll show you on the success that we see as a result of that. I mentioned that we have a new screening tool. So again, when we have students that are still learning to be proficient in English all the way up through level 3, we provide direct services. And then as students move out into level 4 and level 5, there's support through EL facilitators in our schools. We are seeing growth in our EL populations in terms of the number of students who are testing in. So we're also looking at growth, in terms of the number of students who are exiting each year. So slightly more students coming out of our EL program. And this is really, we put this slide in to make a kind of a point about our EL program, because it's easy to look at data and go, okay, we're seeing significant challenges with EL. About half of our kids exit by 2nd grade. And then after that, we have students who also come into our system who are new. And that creates a challenge. When we have kids for an extended period of time, as I mentioned, we have these wonderful supports in place and we follow kids. And then every year we have new students that come in. And so we need to be able to identify them quickly with our screener and then provide support for where they are. That is a different challenge than the support for kids who are in our system all of the years. And so I think, as you mentioned in the response to our ER report, we need to be thinking about that maybe differently. Like, how do you take the 25 students who come in 12th grade and provide really quality support? And so that we'll talk about more in some of our program reports, but specifically we're looking at things like, how do you build really high quality language through vocabulary and academic vocabulary that supports kids so that they can be successful with the content that they're seeing in 12th grade, and train all of the teachers who work with those kids, not just EL teachers. So again, different approaches just depending on where kids enter the system. We also are monitoring how our students are doing over time, and so this is where I think there's some really high-quality work happening. About 72% of our students last year that we had tested the year before showed growth, and about 1,480 or so are new to the system, so those are mostly kindergartners. But as kids are in the system longer, they do well. So just looking at measurement using the ELPA screener, kids are doing well. But more interestingly, over time, kids do better and better after they exit our program. So if we look at ELA, for example, that first year of exit, and this is all of our grade levels, about 69% meet standard. But by the fourth year, we're looking at 90%. So that's better than our all students average. So kids that remain in our system do very well. The same holds true for math. Again, about 65% when they exit, and then over time, around 80% of our students by the fourth year of the exit. So again, we know that there are kids that we need to attend to that are coming into our system that aren't in that 80%, and at the same time, the kids that we prepared, that we've had in our system continuously, are doing very well.
I just want to say I've waited 10 years for that graph, and I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really a testament to the work. And I think it also speaks to that this is an ongoing, continuous effort. It's not a one-shot deal. It took a while for our programs to develop and create this kind of structure, and it's a real testament to the people who are working in our EL program. We also provide services for homeless students, and again, not every homeless student is going to be below standard, but we know that not having a place to live or a place to reside that's permanent puts you at greater risk for academic performance issues, as well as a whole host of other issues. Our homeless support services really are designed to provide kind of that scaffolding of all those basic needs to help kids, and then those kids who are homeless are also served by safety net or services in our schools. So these programs really are designed to make sure kids can get to school, make sure they don't have to worry about some of the logistic barriers to getting food, for example, or getting enrolled, or making sure that the academic supports are all lined up. We have McKinney-Vento homeless foster care liaison who actually works directly with families and makes sure that all those kind of logistic challenges are met. And we also recognize that our population of students who are either homeless or in transition are growing each year. And part of that is more students coming to the system, and also doing a better job of reaching out and identifying students. We also monitor just kind of where kids are from year to year, and for one of the main reasons for this, yes.
Sorry, on that last chart. What about free breakfast?
So that varies by school, so it's a qualification, and I'm not sure, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, so actually, when we did the nutrition services update at the last board meeting, and Darren talked about the Breakfast Before the Bell program, and so we do have students receiving breakfast as well? Is that the question?
I'm thinking about for the homeless kids that we're serving, this is talking about without completing the forms. Seems to me we would also want them to have breakfast.
Yeah, right, it falls under this, I see what you're saying, it falls under the same.
Because these are probably not getting breakfast.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
I believe, and we can double check that, but I believe that that is true. They can receive free breakfast as well, breakfast or lunch without completing
And
the
our
form.
homeless, our McKinney-Vento liaison, homeless liaison, actually works through with families to make sure that that's all taken care of. So, but we'll double check and confirm.
Thank you.
Just monitoring where our students are can give us some ideas of how to better support. So whether that's having to reach out to local shelters and agencies, or providing support for families that aren't in community agencies or community support networks. We also have a vibrant, wonderful Native American Alaska Native program coordinated and run by Mary Wilbur, who's actually regionally very well known. She also works with Bellevue and North Shore. She presented last year some of the wonderful things. The idea here is really if you can provide and wrap culture around students and have students see their culture reflected in school, they will be successful. And Mary has done a amazing job. So there's cultural activities, there's leadership opportunities for kids, there's language work that's done to really help kids to feel connected to their culture and to their school at the same time. And Mary is just an amazing advocate, not only for students, but with families and teachers. And so again, here, a program that would be worthy of thinking about how do we emulate for other groups of students, not just Native American students. And then finally, our title programs, similar to Safety Net, these are providing very specific interventions related to English language arts and math. And the idea here is we have folks who are providing intervention in the schools. At the same time, we're also providing support for all of the teachers in those schools so that we make sure that there's high quality instruction happening for every kid. And then for kids who need more, there are people who are providing interventions, and those interventions are very carefully monitored so that we're making sure that kids are responding to those interventions. And then over time, we can make adjustments if we're not seeing success. And so I want to leave you with tonight just some of the things we're seeing at our three title schools. What we did is we combined the performance for all 3 grade levels at all 3 of our title schools, and we looked at, since we have now SBA scores for the past 3 years, if you take the results from our 3 title schools, put them together, from 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th grade, you see, I think what we heard mentioned last time, we're trying to accelerate the learning of kids, and so the rate of improvement is significantly higher at our title schools. The rate of improvement's great across the district, and I think that relates to our safety net programs as well. But we are closing the gaps in our title schools. And so one of the things there, actually I think there's 2 things here. One of the things there is there are practices that are occurring in our title schools that we can replicate in all of our schools. And you'll also notice for ELA, where we have been spending most of our time for safety net, we're seeing growth as well. And we're starting to think about how do we kind of replicate that for math. And so our goal will be to have the all schools growth for math as well. But for our title schools where we are paying attention and school-wide, there's an approach, really wonderful results. And so that's a way to kind of think about all of our intervention programs. We have title schools represented up here as well as all of our schools, and the growth, particularly in ALA, is a success and a testament to our intervention programs.
Thank you.
I just have
Go
one
ahead, Sari.
question on the Title I. Knowing that the focus is on low income with that, has that been broken out to look at low income within those title
Yeah, we
schools?
can-
I just know that demographics can
Right.
drive that so heavily.
And so that is the factor that allows, or is the factor we use to identify schools that get school-wide support. So yes, we can pull out, the challenge there is we're not pulling out individual students to say, yes, you're a student who is low income and here's the support we're providing for you. But across the board, we can pull out and disaggregate school by school how kids are doing.
I would be intrigued to see if we see the same growth with
Right.
low income across
Yes.
those schools,
Yeah,
I
we
guess
can
is where my
definitely pull
question
that
would
out.
be. That would
Yeah.
be my interest.
Right.
And on that final slide, I wanted to say that, I've given the district a lot of heck over the years for trends that were nothing more than statistical noise. Those gaps are closing. That's beautiful, and that's... the same cohort didn't change their demographics in these 3 schools over those 3 years. It's highly unlikely. Anyway, Mark?
Can we have a chart back up, please?
Yeah, just look at,
There we go. While I applaud the improvements in the closing of the gap in the ELA, the closing of the gap in the math, I don't want us to start patting ourselves in the back too much because it looks like a lot of it is the lowering of the top level as opposed to the raising of the bottom level. And I think that needs some great attention, to be quite frank. Going down from 81 to 76 is very bothersome to me, even not being a math performer myself. It does give me pause.
That's a legitimate concern. I was not complimenting the slope of the top line. I'm complimenting the delta between the 2 lines.
I think what I could add to that, though, is across the state, and it's a 4 or 5%, but across the state we saw a drop. I think when you see a population, though, that is doing better than the state or better than the district, particularly at our title schools, I think the message there is where we are starting to pay attention school-wide to math, we're bucking the trend, not only of the district, but the state. And so, again, that makes you wonder, do we need to replicate that in our other schools?
And our next DR report is mathematics, so
Oh,
we'll get a
fantastic.
deep dive into mathematics performance coming up.
Not tonight, right?
Not tonight.
All right.
Not tonight.
Our
First off, thanks for the presentation.
Yes.
I like the way you added the data in there along the way too, to really sort of highlight those things along the way. So thanks.
Yes. Any further questions for Mike? Nope. All right. So, Dr. Pierce, do you have a SOOPS report?
Yeah, so this again was a report that we bumped from the last meeting, and this is our annual update on safety-related efforts. So Barbara is going to take the lead on presenting our safety update.
Diane, you want to? All right, great. So tonight I am going to talk about our efforts in regards to safety, including our comprehensive emergency management planning, our partnerships, and some facility safety upgrades. So one of the many important parts of our comprehensive emergency planning is our district safety committee. And our safety committee works to advise the district on safety issues and provide recommendations for changes and improvements. The committee is chaired by Scott Emery, our risk, health, and safety manager. There's 33 members on the committee, including school administrators, staff, parents, PTA, safety experts, law enforcement, and first responders from all of our jurisdictions, and the committee meets monthly. We also have in each of our building level plans for emergencies and checklists that they monitor for emergency planning. Our buildings go through ALICE training. It's done in concert with our law enforcement professionals. We have incident command chart job descriptions. Each building conducts an annual emergency drill schedule, which includes fire drills, evacuation drills, lockdown procedures. All our buildings will be participating this Thursday in our district-wide our statewide Great Washington Shakeout, which is Thursday, October 19th at 10:19 a.m. So we'll be participating in that. We also have important partnerships, and one of our PTAs are a really important part of our safety and emergency planning. They provide the PTA has an emergency preparedness committee, which provides support at the school level for safety, emergency supplies, and preparation. They also, they help schools manage supplies, plan, and communicate out with parents and newsletters. Our budget process this year also provided some support and allocation to assist schools with the PTAs with the food and water replenishment. So we also have important partnerships with all of our local jurisdictions. We work with the police, fire, and traffic departments to provide support for safety audits, expertise for traffic, and suggested walk and bike route plans. And then, of course, they help us with our school resource officers. And our school resource officers are uniformed police officers from Kirkland, Redmond, Sammamish, and King County also, which provide support to our high schools and middle schools. They also they speak to classes, so they provide support to schools in assisting in referrals to social agencies, so they're not just there as an enforcement, but they truly are a partner in working with our students and helping keep kids safe. And even though they're mainly in our high schools and middle schools, they can assist any district school upon the request of the administrator. So then talking about some traffic improvements that have happened this year. So Inglewood Middle School, we improved the length of the line for drop-off and pick-up loop, and we more than doubled it. And I have heard very positive comments that it has had a great impact on reducing traffic out in the street. And so there's new signage and striping and to reinforce the new traffic routes. So that was an improvement that was made for this fall. The other improvement at Rosa Parks Elementary School, we have a new student drop-off on 94th Street, which was completed by King County. Our grounds crew also removed brush for easier access. It created additional queuing for increased vehicle traffic and visibility and safety. And then we also had, King County also made some improvements at Dickinson and Evergreen Middle School by installing the flashing beacons, the speed limit signs in multiple locations. And 208th is now one school zone for both Dickinson and Evergreen. So then we can talk about some facility safety upgrades that have been going on, and just going back a little bit, for our 2010 capital projects levy, provided security cameras at our comprehensive high schools, and that project was completed a few years ago. And then our 2014 capital projects levy provided 3 safety projects, and one was classroom locks, which allow the classrooms to be locked from the inside in the event of a lockdown or during an emergency. And that project is complete. And then the 2014 capital projects levy also provided interior classroom window shades. So these coverings can be pulled down again in the event of a lockdown or emergency. And then the third project is updating building access controls to limit access points and the number of entrances to the school buildings. And we, that project, we worked on this summer, and we've got all but 2 schools finishing, getting that finalized. And then our 2018 capital projects levy, which we just approved tonight, the plan for that levy is to continue to expand the lockdown hardware and window treatments, to expand coverage to shared instructional spaces. And then in addition, we will expand security cameras to choice high schools and our comprehensive middle schools. So that, again, pending the voter approval of the 2018 capital projects levy. That is my presentation. So any questions?
You reported in the brief report, because I asked the earthquake preparedness, I think hazards are on all of our minds these days. And I had thought we had been doing earthquake upgrades, and it sounds like we're fairly complete. And of course, the new building codes have, you know, we learn with every major earthquake what we need to do. In terms of storage of food and water, the earthquake drill that was done, the Cascadia event last year, if there's one thing they learned in those 4 days is if we have, and when we have a major earthquake, we will lose a lot of transportation. You know, bridges will go down, freeways. We may need to be able to keep kids longer than has been envisioned. And I would like to see some thought. I'm sure there's guidance from FEMA. I haven't looked specifically at it. I know homes are now being encouraged to have several weeks. I think, obviously, we don't get hurricanes, which has shown that you could go weeks without supplies if you're really isolated. But we do get major windstorms that pull down power. We do get major flooding. But there is going to be a major earthquake at some point. And so I think we need to really be thinking, what can we do in terms of longer term? We can't obviously release the kids until their parents or their guardians or whoever they've assigned can get there to pick their kids up.
We can certainly, I can bring that back to the safety committee and they can talk through that.
Mark? Yeah, on that same note, the stores that are being put in place for those emergency supplies, have they been updated to the Cascadia recommendations of 2+ weeks?
Ask your question again, Mark.
Originally, I mean, the old standard that Nancy was mentioning was, 2 days in your home. Now it's going up to 2+ weeks. What kind of a capacity are we storing up to in our schools?
Yeah, I think we're not at the 2-week mark. So I think that's what Nancy was saying
I'm trying to find out what we are at.
Currently, we're at 3 days.
1 to 3 days. Yeah. So,
Okay.
So we're not at, and so I think that's what Nancy was
And I'm not sure what
suggesting.
FEMA's recommending for schools, because it's a little different from
Right.
homes. But still, it is more than 1 day, and it's probably more than 3 days. And the problem is, I think that with most of the earthquake scenarios, our schools are going to do quite well. But it's getting the kids home and getting the parents. You know, when I went to work in Olympia, Matt and I had to think about this. Our kids were old enough to take care of themselves because we knew that neither of us were going to get home in the event of a real earthquake. One, because he works for FEMA, and me because I was down in Olympia.
But it was my understanding that we, as a district, were covering more of the emergency food than we had historically.
Right, so previously, really PTSAs in the
Been covering that,
buildings
right.
donated the provisions for the 1 to 2 days or 1 to 3 days, water and granola bars,
Yeah.
you know, essentially. And then through our last budget and strategic planning cycle, we allocated a baseline amount to every school, so the district's providing still, it's a baseline, it's not the 2 weeks. So we weren't, you know, just relying on PTSAs to do that. PTSAs still, you know, can enhance, I think, the baseline allocation. So that's where we are with that. So
and
that
it-
was, yes, new
yeah.
this year that we're actually, the district's actually providing a baseline.
Right.
Might not be the,
But we're looking at,
Recommended
are we looking
baseline.
at enhancing the baseline, is what I'm
well, I
saying?
think we're just hearing that come
And so-
tonight as a, you know, suggestion or an area
Yep.
to look at. And so
So
we'll
we'll-
loop
we'll
back
take
with
that
the
back and look
safety
at that.
committee. And look at
But-
what
and
is
there's
FEMA
ways-
recommending for schools and so
Right.
forth.
And I
There's
know,
ways to do it because we do have kitchens at a lot of our schools. So there's a lot of that kind of food available. So there's ways, we're not the only district
I'm
looking
worried
at
about.
this. And like I said,
Like the water I'm
FEMA
worried
has
about.
come out with extensive recommendations.
Well, keep us up to date as the latest disasters play through. Mark?
Yeah. If we go back to the slide on Evergreen,
on which one?
Evergreen,
Oh,
The
Traffic.
pull-through,
Yep.
yeah. One
these
more.
have been very welcome. I mean, the idea of the flashing lights is great. My concern is the parent complaints I keep hearing are about the traffic flow and with the pickup and drop-off. And what have we changed on that to enhance it? Because that's the complaint I'm hearing. I'm not
Wasn't
hearing
that
the.
two slides back? Wasn't that the?
No, that was on a
No, we
different
haven't-
school. That was-
So
Okay.
a
That
year
was on
ago,
Inglewood.
Yeah.
a year ago, last fall, we upgraded the bus chute at Evergreen and Dickinson Elementary. So we made some upgrades to the bus chute that helped isolate that, I believe, from the parent drop-off. So we covered that last year.
I'm still hearing it's a problem.
Okay.
You know,
can
what would be
get-
helpful is if you get those concerns, you could forward them to me so we're aware of.
It's
you know,
usually when they're
what the
tapping me on the
concerns
shoulder
are.
as opposed to an email.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
Sorry. But also, as we look at the Rosa Parks picture you had, on the slide, one of the problems that I see as I go up and down Redmond Ridge is the fact that the school zone stops short of the school by about 50 to 100 yards. It doesn't extend to the actual where the school is facing the road. And so I'd like to see that addressed, if we can. Because that just doesn't quite make too much sense to me, to be quite frank. And now, since we're going to have a middle school a little bit farther down the road, maybe that'll be incorporated, but I don't think that Rosa Parks parents should have to wait 2 years. And also, one of the things I've noticed that I've been very happy with is that in the safety regards, is putting up large numeral and alphabetic designation as to what room that actually is, so that firefighters and other emergency workers can find that. But what I'm finding is that not all the windows still have them. In particular, only 2 out of the 3 sped rooms at RHS have them. So you have to guess at the next number. So I'm just saying that we need to have some continuity. If it's going to be all the windows, let's make it all the windows.
That should be part of our mapping, which they should be going through every year.
Yeah,
We'll follow up on that.
just thought.
All right, thank you. Any further questions for Barbara? Well, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Barbara.
All right, that brings us to the end of our regularly scheduled program, but now for the legislative update.
They're still out of session.
Gee darn. Okay, on to board follow-up. Is there any board follow-up? Future agenda items, debrief, or comments? I just, again, wanted to reiterate, thank you, Siri. That, as a first pass, was, well, it's going to be a hard standard to live up to, but I do see the value. So thank you.
One last, we did meet with the city of Kirkland last week, sorry. It's been a lot of meetings, which was very valuable in just coordinating the different components of the different pieces. So there was, is there anything you want to add? Sorry, my brain just stopped. But we did meet with them.
Well, we discussed the idea of being able to build up and not just out. That was one of the primary things that we were looking at, because they're also looking at the idea of being able to build up and not out in their community for all sorts of housing and buildings. It's just land is just a tight squeeze in that area.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, I think I was taking calls to Newcastle for you.
Yep. Any other comments and follow-up? Hearing none. Nancy, I'm sorry, we're a good 2 minutes behind schedule for you to turn to a pumpkin. But our next board meeting will be November 6th. We've got a study session on the boundary process and recommendation. It'll be here in the Hughes room. It'll be in the Hughes room next door. And then we'll have the regularly scheduled board meeting at 7 p.m. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Bernard, seconded by Director Bleasner. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.